Hey sightseers, Sightseeing Sally here. Today we're going to do something I have never done before. And that is, I'm going to take the journey of a dead man. Or at least a small fraction of it. I believe the entire journey would be 90 miles. Today I'm going to do approximately 3. Don't know what I'm talking about? Here, let me clue you in. We're still exploring the land of enchantment, and I'm currently out in the middle of nowhere at what is known as the Yost Escarpment Trailhead on the El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro National Historic Trail, on a section of the trail known as the Jornada del Muerto, aka the Journey of the Dead Man. According to what I read online, the Yost Draw Trailhead or Trail is one of the most preserved sections of the original Jornada del Muerto, which is why I came out here today. I wanted to experience the trail like it was back in the day. The exception being, of course, that I'm dressed in modern garb and I don't have an old canteen like they did back then. All I've got is my glorious Buc-ee's mug. And I don't have a team of horses, nor am I part of a wagon train, have a mule, or any cattle to go along with me. It's just me wandering around out here in the desert, trying to get a small sense of what it might have been like for all those who came before me and walked this dusty trail. Now, I'm walking up. I believe when I get up top, we'll be able to see the actual trail itself, the original Jornada del Muerto. And as we go along, I'll share with you what I know as to how the trail got its name, some of the hardships that people experienced along this trail, and basically the history, a general version of the history. And I make no guarantees as to the veracity, is that the word I want to use? The factualness of the stuff I share. I'm no expert. I'm just sharing with you the things that I've found when searching on the internet. If I know for certain it's a legend, I'll say it. If I don't know for sure, I'll let you know. But all I'm saying is that there are no guarantees here. And if you're looking to write a history paper on this, I would not use what you learn here. Just saying. Anyways, let's move on. There's lots to talk about, lots to see. It's proving to be a beautiful day out here in New Mexico. And well, I'm enjoying walking along this path. I hope you enjoy it too. The Jornada del Muerto, also known as, in English, the Journey of the Dead Man, is a 90-mile stretch. It basically is a shortcut that was made up so that travelers coming from as far south as Mexico City and going all the way as far north as Santa Fe, New Mexico, could cut off some of the more difficult parts of the journey along the Rio Grande. I guess the terrain along the river was a lot harsher and harder to walk through, harder to deal with than what we've got going on here. Especially when you factor in that many of the travelers were traveling with large, heavy loads, cattle, wagon trains, horses, mules, they were traveling with all their belongings, or perhaps they were, transporting goods from the south going north, vice versa. So for them, it made a lot of sense to have a shortcut if it cut off days, time, and difficulties while traversing the Old West terrain. As you can see, we're out in the middle of a desert. There's mountains off in the distance. But this section here, where we're walking along Jornada del Muerto, was a 90-mile span of basically waterless country. Yeah, you have the mesquite and the creosote and the cactus that grow here. There's no shade trees. Can you imagine using this little tiny bush for shade? And there's no running streams of water from which you can dip your canteen and get a refreshing, cool drink of water. There's only dusty miles of trail ahead of you. You and your horses, your cattle, your wagon train, your mules, however it was that you were traveling. And to go 90 miles without water, well, you wanted to get through this section as quickly as you could. And if you were lucky and you pushed it, you could make it within 3 days. But again, we're talking 3 whole days without any stops for water. Unless you were willing to make a 12-mile detour along this already 90-mile arduous journey through some of the most dangerous territory around. Dangerous not only in the fact that this was the driest section because you were away from the Rio Grande, and there was a point I had read that if you walked 6 miles off the trail, you could find one watering spot along this 90-mile stretch, but then that meant you had to walk the 6 miles back, hence your 12-mile detour. Inland, known to be roamed by the Apache and Navajo Indians, which could put you in danger of being attacked. Now, it is said that those taking the shortcut of Jornada del Muerto often prayed for several things. Do you have any idea what those might be? From what I understand, it was 3 things. Thunderstorms for rainwater, starry skies so that they could make their way easily through the night, and safety from being attacked by, again, the Navajo and Apache. Wow, look at those mountains. I thought I'd stop and point those out real quick. From what I understand, the mountains that you see around are either going to be the Caballo or the San Andres. I failed to look at the map to see exactly which ones were which, but looking off west, that's the west direction there, you can see mountains. To the south, you've got these mountains here. They're a little faded because we got a little bit of cloud cover here, but blue skies up above. And then way off over there, you can't even see it. It's right at the horizon. That's the easterly direction. You can see mountains over there too. Again, we have a beautiful day to hike this trail, but those coming through here weren't always so fortunate. Depending on the time of year that they came through, they were either dealing with blazing summer temperatures or freezing cold nights during the winter, which added another element besides the fear of being attacked or not living through this section because you became too dehydrated, or your cattle or your horses or your mules became too dehydrated and couldn't carry on any further. You also had to worry about other elements like the heat and the cold. Obviously, you know that the heat's gonna rob you even faster of whatever water you have, but the cold at night puts you at risk of hypothermia. Exposure to the elements was really no joke. In fact, the gentleman after whom the trail got its name lost his life due to exposure. His name, Bernardo Gruber, otherwise known as El Alemán. As the story goes, Bernardo was accused by the Inquisition of witchcraft. As a result, he was put into prison, a Sandia Pueblo prison. After spending about 2 years in prison, he made his escape and attempted to cross 90 miles of forbidding desert south of Socorro, between the Paraje de Fray Cristobal to the north and the Paraje de Robledo to the south. And yes, I know, my pronunciation of these Spanish words is horrible. His luck upon making that escape soon ran out, and eventually his remains were found out in the desert. From then on, that section of the Camino Real, the shortcut across the desert there, was called Jornada del Muerto, otherwise known as Dead Man's Journey or the Journey of the Dead Man. One of the nice things, and another reason why I decided to hike along the Yost Escarpment, is that along the trail they have these really nice interpretive panels, storyboards, whatever you want to call them. This particular one talks about how over time the mesquite have taken root along the old trail. And if we look up over there, you can see instances where you got darker terrain. And that, I believe, is where the old section of the trail ran through, is right here. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, I think right over here. Let me zoom in. Here we go. You can kind of see now a little bit better what I'm talking about. The thing about it is that, you know, over time, as people stopped walking through, you no longer had that erosion. And obviously, when you're pushing through cattle and sheep and mules, they leave remnants behind, and those remnants helped fertilize soil where seeds from like the mesquite germinated. And well, when it rained, you know what I'm saying. You can see one of the many trail indicators or markers that help mark your way as you're traversing the Yost Escarpment. I imagine back in the day, at least originally, when the first took this route, took this shortcut, they didn't have many trail indicators. It was only over time as more and more people, forged their way along the path, did the path eventually get worn. I had read that today you may still find pieces, relics of like old pottery shards and tin cans from the American military, indicating camps that would have been made along the way. So far today, though, I haven't seen anything like that. I imagine with this trail being a public trail, you aren't going to find many of those indicators anymore. At least not here on the trail itself, but who knows what you might find out there in the unexplored territory of this vast wilderness. I just thought I would stop for a moment, and I'm looking north, and there's mountains off in the distance there too. Essentially, those early explorers, those early travelers were walking through a valley, a desolate valley, much like Death Valley in California, except maybe not as treacherous or dangerous, but still quite a feat when you think about it. As I'm walking along and trying to imagine what it was like for those early travelers, the one thing that I know is still the same is that if you stop to listen, here, just set my water glass down for a moment. If you just stop to listen, all you hear is the wind. That is the sound of silence. And I know if somebody was out traveling 2, 3, 400 years ago along this very trail, and if they stopped to listen, that is likely what they heard as well. While I'm sitting here waxing poetic over the sound of silence, over the stillness, I've noticed that we've come upon another one of those amazing storyboards. Let's go see what it says. You are now walking on one of the great roads of North American history. Traveling the entire length of El Camino Real between Mexico City and Santa Fe required a 6-month commitment. That's longer than what some people even date a person these days. Just think, that commitment would have involved days without water, food shortages, river crossings, heat strokes, grass fires, snake bites, and perhaps even an attack, either by the Native Americans or some other nefarious gang of bandits. To take this shortcut here, you'd have had to spend probably 2 nights on the trail, either traveling by starlight, pushing through the night, or sleeping in some sort of rough campground. Yeah, sleeping on the ground with a rock for your pillow. How cozy would that be? I can tell you that this modern day soul would have some difficulty. You know, we're too soft. People back then, I think, were a lot hardier than most folks these days. Just saying. And I don't mean that as passing some sort of judgment on people of today. It's just that, you know, you really have to think about the differences between back then and now. And you don't have to deal with stuff like that anymore because of all the modern conveniences. Oh, look, here's something that some poor, unsuspecting traveler would not want to run across. That is, if it's the home of those fiery, red, biting ants. And speaking of creatures that they would have encountered, yes, I mentioned snake bites, the possibility of snake bites. There would have been rattlesnakes out here, especially if you were traversing during the summer months. You know, in the heat of the day, they would have been likely sitting out, warming themselves. And then you also have the scorpions and tarantulas and coyotes, hungry coyotes, jackrabbits, which that might have provided you with a source of food if you were fast enough to catch one. And earlier, I scared one out of the bush, out of the mesquite, the creosote, but it ran off so fast, I didn't even get it on film. But this here, right now, where we're walking, is part of that old historic trail. Isn't that just incredible? We're walking where so many people walked before, traversing this arid terrain, unsure if they were going to make it even all the way to the northernmost point of the shortcut. The fact that I am now standing on the very ground that the early Spanish explorer Juan de Oñate himself traversed in 1598 just blows my mind. He was the first person to take this shortcut, to make his way north using this route, and without any of the so-called modern conveniences that we have today. And yes, I know, sightseers, carrying this ridiculously heavy Buc-ee's mug out here on this route is just really a form of my own dark humor, poking fun at all the tourists to go out to some of these places and, you know, act like tourists. But I guess some of you already know that and don't need any explanation. But for those of you who are new and don't, that's one of the things that makes me me. Okay, well, I'm gonna move on just a little bit here. I've been doing a lot of yapping about stuff. I thought for a moment I would just kind of walk along quietly so you can hear my footsteps and maybe imagine yourself walking along this trail. I suppose to make it more authentic to back in the day, we'd need to have the sounds of cattle walking behind me, perhaps the sounds of horses, you know, neighing or whinnying, because that's what the early travelers would have heard along with the sounds of their footsteps, is their animals accompanying them across this desert terrain. Look at that bush. I wonder how old it is. Or this rock, how long it's been sitting here. Or that piece of wood there, that dead wood. Was that once a thriving, part of a thriving green mesquite or creosote that would have been around back when so many of these travelers were using this route? I don't know if you realize, but this route was actually used up until the 1880s when the railroad came to town. Prior to that, they used this very route to haul goods up from Mexico or El Paso or any of the points in between Mexico City and here. We're getting to the point in the trail where some of the trail markers aren't as easily identified. I imagine for some of the travelers on this trail, that was their experience as well, that perhaps they weren't able to always find the visible signs of the trail, that some of them probably lost their lives because they stepped off the trail and wandered off into the distance there and never found their way to where they were supposed to be going. Man, that's a dark thought. Nothing like livening up your day with the dreadful thoughts of Sightseeing Sally. Honestly, I'm not sure how much farther I'm gonna walk. There were differing accounts as to how long this trail was. I thought I had read that the trail was 1.5 miles, and then another account said that you follow along 3.8 miles of the Jornada del Muerto. Perhaps it's a combination of that first part, the trailhead that brings you out is 1.5 miles, and then you can go an additional 3.8 miles. Regardless, that's a lot of walking, and I'm already sitting back at the truck. I'm starting to run low on water, and well, the idea was to bring you out here, bring myself out here, and just get a feel for what it was like for those early travelers. And I don't know, I think I've done that, at least for myself. Perhaps I'll go just a little bit further because I think I might have spotted another one of those storyboards up ahead. I'll just go up a little longer, a little ways, and see. Oh look, at least I know I'm still on the trail, going the right way. I don't know if today's trail loops around dead ends or what. I was assuming based on the entrance that it was one way in and one way out. And the other thing is that you're supposed to be able to see Spaceport America from the trail. And I know we're moving north along the trail. And Spaceport America was about 3 or 4 miles north of the trailhead. Oh, I think I spoke too soon, sightseers. Up ahead, I can see several more storyboards and what appears to be a huge drop-off, which would make sense that this is called the Yost Escarpment. Oh yeah, there's definitely a huge drop-off. I'll get closer, that way you can see for yourself. It's just beyond the storyboards. You can see over there where the landmass just kind of bloop, and down in front of me here, it's just down, and then way out there, I believe is Spaceport America. Let's see what these storyboards, interpretive signs say. Oh, this first one says, moving the goods. And we're not talking about those kinds of good sightseers. We're talking about the way they moved their merchandise or livestock or whatever it was that they were hauling up here. Here you can see what the wagons look like. Look at how huge those wheels are. According to this, it says the wheels on these huge wagons were 8 to 10 feet tall and 12 feet apart. A carro could carry up to 12,000 pounds of cargo. Wow, that was some kind of heavy merchandise that they were bringing. But it wasn't just merchandise, they were also, like I said, bringing livestock, and some of the type of livestock that they brought included these churro sheep, which according to this could survive for days without water. And then over here we've got this storyboard talking about the dead man of the Jornada, El Hombre Muerto de la Jornada, which, if you recall, I talked about him earlier in the video. Bernardo Gruber spent 2 years in a tiny prison cell. After that, he escaped with the help of an Apache friend. This sign actually shares a lot more details I didn't know. Here, the two fled south on El Camino Real. After 2 waterless days of travel, El Ailman, as he was called, stopped and sent his friend ahead to search for water. According to this, when the Apache friend returned 2 days later, the Ailman had disappeared. Somewhere out there, he had wandered off. Weeks later, traders traveling south found, quote, a roan horse tied to a tree by a halter. It was no longer alive. Searching, they soon discovered hair and the remnants of clothing, a skull, 3 ribs, 2 long bones, and 2 other little bones which had been gnawed by animals. Those were later determined to be the grisly remains of Bernardo Gruber. After that, a cross was erected at the spot where Bernardo Gruber passed away in 1670. That place became known by travelers as La Cruz del Alemán, or simply Alemán, or Ailman if you're speaking with an English accent. Some 200 years later, in 1867, Civil War veteran John Martin dug a water well in that location, or general location, and named his ranch El Alemán, or El Ailman. Over the years, that very ranch was a well-known stop for travelers. It was also a stagecoach stop and a post office. In the mid-1880s, that Traveler's Rest became part of the Bar Cross Ranch. I guess if we look out there to the north, we can see some of the Bar Cross buildings, although it's really hard to tell through the camera. And then you got this other board here that just basically talks about some of the things I had mentioned, the relics that archaeologists were finding along the trail as they try to uncover and understand the history of El Camino Real and the Jornada del Muerto. And there you have it, sightseers. This is virtually the end of the line for me. I'm gonna head back. to Marty and the trek and bid you all adieu. Until next time.